Good morning. Welcome to the TCG Pro Show. I'm Brad Williams, and we're back again this week with more expert knowledge. The TCG Pro Show is all about bringing you the experts with the information you need for anything concerning buying a home, taking care of your home. We want to bring the best people on here, get the knowledge that they have, and bring it to you guys. I'm Brad Williams. I'll be your host today. I'm joined by my co-host, Don Williams.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dad. And with this morning, we have a special guest. We think he is an awesome professional in his field to talk about something that I think a lot of people have questions about, but maybe a little taboo subject. We have Scott Riddle of Riddle Septic Systems. Good morning, bud.
Good morning.
So thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is going to be kind of a fun show, and I think people have a lot of questions about this topic, and they're unsure about different things, I'm sure. Scott's not just a business owner. I think he's a comedian as well. He is not just the owner of his business, but he's the driver of what is called the stool bus.
That's right.
So where did that come from? Did you come up with that on your own?
Well, been doing this a long time, so you just you make jokes, along the way, and we've always kind of called our pump truck the stool bus when I worked for other companies. So when I bought the truck, it turned out to be yellow, and I figured it's the same color as a school bus, so I'll just put stool bus on the back of it and get a few laughs, and that's what we did.
Yeah, I've seen you guys have some creative outfits and stuff for the parades and everything else. That's really cool. You might as well make light of
absolutely
of something that may be a little gross, I guess, per se.
Figured we'd have fun with it.
So, so you own a company, a septic company. How long have you been in this business?
I've been in the business since 2003. So I started there whenever I was in high school working for a guy, and then just been doing it ever since, just working for somebody else.
Why did you choose this line of work, or did it just find you?
It just kind of found me. Whenever I was in high school, I was working for this guy, and I was paying for my tuition at high school, and it was kind of, I'd try to work other jobs, and I'd get laid off, and I'd always come back to it. So
yeah,
I figured it was always going to be there, and it was the only job I had that was steady, So I just kind of stuck with it.
Cool.
So when did you start in business for yourself?
Actually, almost a year to date. It was March of last year is when I started.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So excited about it.
How has that been, being a business owner versus working for somebody else?
Stressful. It's got its moments, but I like being able to control what I can do, and I'm providing the level of service that I feel is necessary to customers. So it's been great.
If you could give one piece of advice to somebody wanting to start a service business over what you've learned over the last year, what would that be?
Answer the phone. That's been the biggest thing, is just answering the phone and calling people back and just providing the level of service.
It's really interesting in the service business. We hear all the time, people just don't answer the phone.
They don't.
Yeah, that's
how many times have we heard a successful service contractor say, well, half the calls I get, half the jobs I set up, somebody said, well, you're the first person that answered the phone. So, man, if you're starting a business, answer it by the second ring, they say. You got to answer your phone if you want business. I know that's not what this show is about, but if that's a huge piece of advice.
Yes, sir. So,
to your business, what all services do you guys do? What does a septic company do?
First of all, we pump septic tanks. We do point of sale inspections for real estate transactions. We do repairs on systems that are failing or just have issues. We put in new systems. Basically, anything that has to do with the septic system, we can handle.
Okay.
Yeah, except for the perk testing part, which has to be done by the county.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let's kind of start there with the beginning with pumping septic tanks. When does that happen? Is that something somebody should get done every year, every 5 years? Is when you have a problem?
Well, typically, what I tell people is a family of 3 to 5 needs to have it done about every 3 or 4 years. The idea is to pump it when it's about 35% full of solids. And so that usually it depends. I mean, there's a lot of factors that play in there, how much water you use. But that usually I tell people every 3 to 4 years to have it done.
Okay.
If it's just a single person living in a house, you can probably wait 5 years. But most of the time I tell people 3 or 4 years to get it done. And that's what the state recommends.
So, you're living in a house with a septic system. That just kind of brings a question to my mind. Is there things you can do to be hard on the system, things you can do to help take care of it? What kind of advice would you give?
Watch your water usage. Check your faucets, check your toilet, stuff like that. Because water will kill the system, and you're supposed to use so much water per day is what they kind of figure when they design a system. People who use a lot of water will kill a system. What you flush, you got to watch what you flush. The only thing that should go down there is the solids and the toilet paper. Kitchen grease is a no-no. Any feminine hygiene products are no, they don't break down. Flushable wipes are huge right now, and they're killing people's septic systems. And it takes us twice as long to pump them out. It's just they're a real burden. At the wastewater treatment plant, they're having problems down there with them for people flushing them. So
just because it says it on the package doesn't mean it's good for your system.
No,
okay.
It's not at all. They're horrible for systems.
That's a good piece. That's a real good piece of advice. So really, you should watch your water usage. I didn't know that. So too much just running water down the drain is hard on a system. And does that mean it gets pumped faster, or does it kind of throw off the system and it has to be how does that hurt the system?
Well, the tank itself is designed to accumulate solids.
Right.
It gives the retention time for the solids to separate. And then the water itself goes out into the drain field, and that's where the soil absorbs it. Certain types of soils take water slower than others. So if people use a lot of water, the system can't keep up. The dirt around the system can't keep up, so it's sitting there, and then it can cause a problem where it backs up in the house.
Okay, so basically you're just saturating the ground.
Saturating the ground, and it just has nowhere to go.
So there are a couple of products out that I've seen on the shelves at Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever, that say you can flush it down the toilet, that helps with the process of breakdown, whatever. Do you have any? Do you know anything about that?
I don't recommend any of that. And actually, there's been studies that happened at NC State here in North Carolina that have said that they're really, some of them are actually hurting septic systems because they're saying they're additives and they're going to help boost the bacteria. There's already enough bacteria in the system to do its job. So you're just a lot of times. Some of the chemicals, and there's so many different brands out there and different companies out there making these chemicals. Some of them are actually killing some of the bacteria out there. But no, I don't recommend any of those. The yeast is something a lot of people use. You're wasting money because it's still going to have to be pumped the same amount of time.
What about there's kind of an old wives' tale, if you will, about putting tomato juice.
I've not heard that.
You haven't heard that? Okay.
No, I've not heard that one.
That it helps create the proper enzymes or whatever to break down.
I've not heard that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't recommend anything because there's already enough bacteria in there to do its job. So that's just you're literally flushing money down the toilet by putting stuff in your septic system.
So if you're just tuning into the show, this is the TCG Pro Show. This morning we're with Scott Riddle of Riddle Septic Systems. We would love to answer your questions live. Submit them in the comments below, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. So going on from tank pumping, the next thing you mentioned was point-of-sale inspections during real estate, and that's probably what we see the most, and I think what our listeners will be most interested in. What's involved with an inspection?
Well, the first thing we do is dig up the tank. And we pump the tank out. We want to make sure that the tank is structurally sound. We've come across a lot of tanks that pop the lid on, everything seems to be looking good. We pump them down, and there's just massive cracks in the bottom of the tank or underneath the mid-seam level. We'd have never found it if we not pump them, so I think that's very important. The outlet tee or outlet baffle is a very important component of the system as well. It stops any solids from going out to the drain field, so we want to make sure that's there. And we'll probe the tail lines, make sure that they're not overly saturated, or make sure they're not just bone dry, because that could be an issue too, where there's an obstruction. We measure setbacks from property lines, wells, from structures. We look for evidence of traffic on the drain field or heavy vegetation like trees and stuff like that. So we just look at a lot of different things that could be an issue to somebody buying a house with a septic system.
Do people do inspections without pumping then?
Some companies out there do, and in North Carolina, by law, you don't have to pump a tank to do an inspection, but I just feel that I can't thoroughly inspect the tank if it's full of liquid and solid.
Right.
And I get a lot of people who try to get me to do it, and I don't feel comfortable doing inspections saying that I think the tank is good if I can't see 100% of it. So that's been my policy is I can't do inspections without pumping them.
What's the risk to having a tank that's not in good structural shape?
It could collapse. It could be a safety concern. I've heard stories of people, and I've actually know of a customer. It happened about 10 years ago riding his lawnmower, and the front of the lawnmower fell in because the tank had collapsed, and he didn't even realize it. So it's basically just the dirt over top of the tank, and when he drove his lawnmower, the dirt fell in.
Okay.
So that's been an issue. So that's kind of why you want to make sure that, especially if kids and stuff like that.
Sure.
And it could be a real bad thing.
I know during home inspection, sometimes we see where there's a big dip in the yard, and what could cause that?
A lot of times it's settling. Like if it's over the tank or the drain field when they put it in, they could have not put enough dirt around it, and then over time the rain settles and it could cause a dip. A lot of times whenever I go to pump a tank, And after we get done, we cover the hole back up with the dirt and it settles down some. There's a little bit. There never seems to be enough dirt to go back in the hole whenever you dig a hole. So sometimes that happens, but that's usually what we see there.
Is that sometimes an indicator that the lid is cracked or broken?
Sometimes it can be, not always. It's hard to really tell until you open it up and see it. I mean, I've come across some that I thought were going to be an issue and dug them up, and now it's just pumped recently and somebody lost some dirt or something. So it happens.
What would cause cracks in the tank or the lid to break? What would cause that?
The lids themselves aren't really uncommon for breaking. I've seen those. I had two that I did yesterday I had broke. And just whenever, because it's concrete sitting on concrete, so a lot of times you have to kind of beat it a little bit. You don't want to beat it too hard, but some contractors will hit it a little harder than necessary and can cause it to crack. The tanks themselves, traffic over them, people driving heavy vehicles and machinery over it is a big issue, and you're not supposed to. So, yeah, a lot of times it's vehicles cracking them.
Now, we've noticed that when guys come out to inspect tanks during a home inspection, that they seem to just be able to probe down and find it so quick. What's the secret?
Well, you just get good after a while. Nobody likes to probe. It can be a lot of work to probe, so you learn to get good at it. It's hard to. I look for the vent pipe on the roof, and usually I've been putting them in for 15 years and been messing with them for 15 years. So you just learn where contractors put tanks. So if I find the plumbing coming out and kind of know a general idea where the plumbing's coming out,
right,
I have a pretty good idea. I know where the tank is.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of times on newer houses, there'll be a clean out there in the line that you can see on the surface. But
yeah, a lot of times. And a lot of times nowadays, I think it's even code around here to put tracer wire from the pipe, the clean out coming out to the tank.
Oh, that's a grand idea.
Yeah, it makes it really easy to find. Yeah. But
so as far as life expectancy of a system, do they have a life expectancy? How long do systems typically last?
There's a lot of different factors that play into that. Maintenance. People that don't pump their tank like they're supposed to, their system's not going to last as long. Different soil conditions. We have 400 different types of soils in North Carolina alone.
How many?
400 different types of
400
soils in North Carolina.
I would have
alone.
thought 3 or 4.
Right.
No, that's what you would think. Even around this area in Kernersville, where we're at, I mean, you can go to one side of the county and you've got immaculate dirt, and it's just any system will perk well there. You go to the other side and they're having issues with the soil, and systems aren't perking, and systems are failing on account of that. So I'd say the average life expectancy is 30 to 40 years. It's been in my experience. I've seen some that were put in the 60s, still functioning fine today. I've got one right now that I've got to repair that was put in 2001. So they've not been really good on their maintenance, not pumped their tank. When I did pump their tank, whenever they had issues, it's full of wipes that are a big no-no. There's a lot of grease in there, so it just depends on how it's treated.
What fails on the system? Like what?
The tail lines, the dirt. A lot of times, people who use more water than necessary oversaturate the lines. I've seen it where people have just didn't know where their system was, so they made a driveway of their system. So they've collapsed half their system, driving over it over time. So that's happened. The older systems, a lot of times they're made out of concrete pipe, back in the 60s and stuff. And those pipes just deteriorated and fell apart, and they just kind of don't work anymore.
So let's talk about some of the options if they have a failed system. I know that today, if you were to get a permit to put a system in, you would have to have a repair area.
Correct.
Do all homes have repair areas?
They're supposed to. I'm not sure of the date whenever they made the rule saying that they have to have a repair area, but today, whenever they build a house and you get the permit to build a house and they design a system, they design the initial system that the house is going to use, and they also designate a repair area that you need to be aware of if you're buying a house and you think, oh, well, that's a great spot to put a swimming pool. It might be designated for something, and that's the reason to get permits.
So let's just kind of take even a step back on that and assume that people don't know what this means. What is a repair area?
If the system eventually fails, the original septic system eventually fails, due whatever reason it would be, you've got to have somewhere else to put it. Your water's got to go somewhere.
Right.
So that they designated an area, and they've already did a perk test on that dirt to make sure it's good enough area to put a system. So that way you've got, whenever your system, or if your system ever fails, you're just not up the creek. So
to speak.
So to speak, yeah.
So it's really just an area that has perk. There's not actually lines in the ground.
There's nothing. It's just virgin dirt. It can't be in any sort of fill or anything like that. It's just virgin dirt that they've already checked and made sure, okay, this system, or this area right here is good for whatever type of system that they can design.
So somebody were to face that, their system were to fail, they needed to use it, would they have to have the health department come out and recheck that again, that repair?
A lot of times they do, because over time the dirts can change, erosion, and there's totally different things that can happen. Not to mention, people will put a driveway over it, they'll cut dirt down, and if they say, okay, your septic system right here is good, you've got 3 foot of good dirt on top, and then there's enough good dirt underneath it for the water to drain, and they come out there with a skid steer and grade 2.5 foot of it, well, it changes the whole dynamic.
Sure.
So they'll come back out there. If your system fails, they'll call the county, they'll issue a permit, and they'll look at it, and then they'll do whatever they got to do, make changes to whatever system they originally designed 30 years ago.
So if they have to repair, let's say they have to put a new system in, is there a kind of a range of what the cost will be? How does that?
A lot of it is. I get that question a lot. What is the system going to cost me? And once I have a permit in hand, I can say, yep, this is my price to quote it.
Right.
Typically, 3-bedroom house, 2-bathroom, a conventional system minus a tank, because most time a repair, tank's good, we're going to use the existing tank. So minus the tank, just usually their general rule of thumb is 300 foot per bedroom. So if it's a 3-bedroom house, they're going to want you to put in 300 foot of line. That usually ranges from $4,000 to $6,000 for a conventional system.
And that would be for the line replacement, assuming the tank is good.
Correct.
So you said something real important. You said you had to, once you have the permit in hand, then you can do, because the county designs the system.
Correct.
That would go in if it's going to be a conventional system.
Correct.
If it requires an engineered system, then it gets a lot more expensive than that.
It can. I've quoted some systems that required a pump, required 48 inches of sand underneath 24 inches of stone that was 98 inches in the ground. Those systems get expensive. That's not a conventional system by far. So those systems get expensive, and that's why I tell people I don't really like to give prices. I give them ballpark figures, and I tell them I quoted one $10,000 the other day, poor guy. So I mean it happens, and it just all that depends on the soil conditions.
What is the difference between a conventional system and an engineered system?
The conventional system, the way it's always been done, is 3 foot wide trench and 12 inches of gravel, and then there's corrugated pipe. Now we're using gravelless systems now with infiltrator chambers, and it takes the place of the rock, and it just gives it creates a cavity underground for the water until the soil can take it. A lot of engineered systems are low pressure pipe systems where they're forcing the effluent sewage water into the soil because the soil might not take it as well, or they're treating the sewage and maybe even discharging it into a creek. So in some cases, so engineer will design all that, not necessarily the county. If the county comes out and says your ground is horrible, we can't put a septic system here, there are other options. Just depends on how much money you want to spend.
Then you have to bring an engineer in.
Correct.
To
a soil licensed
design.
soil scientist, and then an engineer, and then they'll design something and make something work, and then send it to the state for approval to make sure they'll approve it, and then you'll hire somebody to put it in.
So you said like sometimes they even have to bring in sand and rock, different types of soil.
Correct.
That'll create that permit.
Correct.
Percolability, I guess would be the right word. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's a word or not.
Yeah.
We'll go with it. So somebody is getting ready to build a house or install a system. Are there other things that they should know that you would give them, other pieces of advice that you would give them other than get your permit early in the process?
Well, get your permit early in the process, find a good contractor, and then find you somebody who's knowledgeable, can walk you through all the steps and answer all your questions. It's a big deal. A lot of people just don't know,
So do you install on new construction? Do you install?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a couple of builders here around here that I work with and install all their systems for. I've got probably 4 on the books right now to get done. So,
what makes for a good septic contractor? Don't mean to put you on the spot, but what makes for a good septic contractor?
Somebody's honest. Somebody's honest and can answer all your questions. And there's a lot of different companies out there who like to hoodoo you. And there's a lot of old wives' tales. People say you don't have to pump out the entire tank because you want to leave some bacteria in there. A lot of times people said that just so they might be able to skimp out a little bit on this one so they can maybe fit another one on their truck and make a little bit more money. So that's kind of how that became. I pump all the tanks out,
Right.
just make sure they're licensed. There's some companies out there who aren't licensed who put in systems illegally. And a lot of times those are the companies who are trying to pull one over on you. You got an issue, you don't want to get a permit, or you don't know you have to get a permit. Anytime you need some septic work done, and if you talk to a contractor who says you don't have to worry about a permit, that's usually a sign to run away from that contractor.
Right.
And they say there's nothing that I do without a permit. I want to make sure that everything's approved by the county or by the state.
So are you licensed with the state then?
I am. Mm-hmm.
So that's something that if you're going to hire a contractor, you should ask them to show their license.
Probably wouldn't be a bad idea.
Okay.
And there's lists. NC State has a list of approved contractors in the state. You can get on the state's actual website and look at people who are licensed in the state. There's a lot of them that are. Even if there's a guy who's licensed, and if he tells you can put in a system without a permit, he's wrong. And he might be trying to get one over on you or trying to make a quick buck without getting the county involved. And he's probably going to be the type of contractor who doesn't call you back whenever the system fails in a year after he's done it. So,
right.
And you get the permit to protect yourself.
Yeah, we had a whole show talking with the county code inspector about permitting, and there's this big misconception that in this case, and I'm not even a big government person, but in this case, permitting and these regulations are designed to protect the public, not to control, not to make your life harder. It's designed so you don't get yourself in a costly, unsafe, bad situation.
Correct.
So you mentioned that one of the things that people do that's not a good idea is not totally pumping the system. Are there other things that you see out there that contractors do that's a bad idea or a bad thing?
That's really the biggest thing right there is just not pumping the tank all the way. Some companies will just drop the hose in, and it's just from a pumping standpoint. We provide a lot of services, but from pumping, they'll drop the hose in, just pump the water out and go. Well, they're leaving the solids in there. The whole point of pumping the tank is to evacuate it of all the solids because the solids accumulate and the water goes out.
Right.
But a lot of homeowners don't know, so they're trusting the professional they called to do the job correctly. So it's one thing that gets under my skin is when I roll up after somebody that's already been there and it doesn't look like it's been pumped in 20 years, but they said it was pumped 6 months ago. And I'm just like, there's just no way. And all too often it happens, and it just gets under my skin. But it's part of the job. You got to deal with people like that.
Can you speak to what you do as far as, backing up what you do? Can you kind of give us if someone has a problem 6 months after you have pumped the system or whatever?
A lot of times people call me, and it's unfortunate because you should pump your tank for preventive maintenance reasons. But I get a lot of calls from people who said, I can't flush my toilets. So I'll roll up. It's been 20, 30 years since they've pumped their tank. So it's full of solids. It's an awful job. I take care of it and get it done. Well, a lot of times the damage is done. So they'll call me back in 6 months and say, hey, I got a wet spot in my yard, or it's still backing up. What did you do? I didn't have any problems before you showed up. And that's a lie. That's why they called me.
Right.
And so I get those calls a lot, and I explain to them, you've neglected your system. So I get those calls, not really a lot, because I feel I do a good job of explaining to homeowners. Whenever I show up at a house to pump your tank, you're not just paying me to pump your tank, you're paying me to educate you, because a lot of people just don't know. So I try to educate as best as I can on people's systems.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. Did you have any other questions? So if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, we'll start with what areas do you serve in the area?
I pretty much service the whole triad, Stokes County, Forsyth County, into Davie, into Davidson. I don't get into Randolph County. I try not to get on the other side of Greensboro from where we're at. Kernersville's huge market, Oak Ridge, Summerfield, Walkertown is kind of my local area, in all of Winston-Salem.
And so you guys can do pumping, inspections, and system installation.
Correct, and repair work.
So if somebody wanted to get in touch with Riddle Septic Systems, what do they need to do?
Give us a call.
What's your number?
336-709-5014.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or do you think people should know?
I don't know. I think we're pretty good.
All right. Well, thanks for being on the show, Scott.
Man, thank you for having me.
I think this was extremely informative on a subject that may not be sexy, but it's important. It's important if you have a system. It can be costly, sanitary, whole lot of issues. Like you said, I never even thought about the safety aspect with tanks in the yard, but there's definitely some things in there. I definitely learned a few things. So we really appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in to the Pro Show. We will be back next week with more expert guests and more awesome information, and we'll see you soon.